I am a woman in my 50s, who, since my youth, has embraced the idea of reciprocity. I believed that my hard work and kindness would be returned by others in kind. This principle shaped my relationships, and I firmly thought that showing compassion would inspire others to do the same. Even after I married, I clung to this belief, hoping that the care and consideration I showed my husband would be reciprocated. Back then, the expectations placed on women were different. Sacrifice was often seen as our role, and I fully embraced that norm. I gave myself to my family, confident that these sacrifices would lead to a rich and meaningful life. But things didn't turn out as I had envisioned. Despite my tireless efforts and countless early mornings dedicated to my family, my contributions often went unappreciated, overshadowed by complaints and small mistakes. I didn't fall into this life out of necessity. I was just a regular woman who married a coworker 5 years older than me, fitting in with the societal expectations of that time. After my daughter was born, I left my job to become a full-time homemaker. I never regretted it, seeing it as a necessary step to keep the family intact. My life wasn't glamorous like the stories on TV, but it was steady and manageable until my daughter entered 9th grade. That's when disaster struck. My mother passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack. Amid my grief, I uncovered my husband's affair. While I mourned, he found comfort in someone else, growing distant and eventually asking for a divorce. In those days, divorce carried a heavy stigma. Even though his behavior was cold and irresponsible, I hesitated to consider separation. Looking back, I see how naive I was. With our daughter witnessing the breakdown of our marriage, I felt stuck. One evening, during an intense argument about our separation, my father, recently widowed and deeply concerned for me, came to visit. Seeing my pain, he urged me to leave with my daughter and offered us a place to stay. His support was a turning point. With his help, I saw that staying in a broken marriage wasn't the answer. Overwhelmed by his kindness and wisdom, I decided to divorce. In the settlement, my husband gave me $6,000 in cash. With my father's support, I was able to find a modest 3-bedroom townhouse for my daughter and me. It marked the beginning of a new chapter, but I braced for the difficulties ahead. As a divorced woman raising a teenager, I knew I would face judgment. My daughter, like many teenagers, struggled with the changes, often voicing her frustration. But I couldn't afford to dwell on the past. I had to focus on providing for her. So, I threw myself into finding steady work. Being an older, divorced woman with a dependent child made the job market tough. But I kept going, taking on multiple part-time jobs, working night shifts, and doing freelance work whenever I could. As time went on, my daughter entered her senior year of high school. Despite our financial struggles, she excelled in her studies and found ways to thrive. Determined to secure her future, I took on a demanding job at a 24-hour restaurant. During my 11-hour shifts, I saved most of my earnings for her college tuition. Throughout, I faced judgment and gossip, especially from married men who assumed I was vulnerable. But I stayed focused on her future. The sacrifices were many, but I was committed to giving her the opportunities one never had. She became my rock, giving me the strength to keep going. I held on to the hope that one day we would look back on these challenges with pride in how far we had come. A year later, my daughter's stellar academic performance earned her admission to Harvard University. That moment brought me indescribable joy, making all our struggles feel worthwhile. As she started her college journey, I reflected on everything we had been through and felt a profound sense of accomplishment. I was proud of the strength we'd shown, knowing our sacrifices had brought us to this point. Though I had given her a solid education and a stable home, the emptiness left by her absence was real. We stayed in touch through frequent phone calls, and in the early months of her independence, our bond deepened. Her continued love and connection were comforting, and I treasured the way our relationship had grown despite everything we'd endured. When my daughter graduated without any financial burdens, something we had worked so hard for, I felt an immense sense of fulfillment. I had hoped that we would live together again, but to my surprise, she found a job at a defense corporation and chose to live on her own. To support her choice, I took out a loan and helped with the down payment for a condo near her workplace. As I embraced a simpler lifestyle, my daughter blossomed into a stylish, competent career woman. Watching her succeed filled me with pride, reinforcing the value of the sacrifices I had made for her. However, as her wedding loomed, a new financial challenge emerged. Some questioned why I still struggled financially when she could now support herself. But I remained determined to contribute to her wedding expenses, wanting to avoid any potential tension with her future in-laws. I believed that the sacrifices I made for her happiness would bring joy to both of us. As she began dating more seriously, I noticed a growing distance between us. At first, it hurt, but I came to understand that her adult life and relationships needed to take precedence. I waited patiently, hoping she would mature and reconnect with me, recognizing that priorities shift during this stage of life. Then, on her 28th birthday, I faced a bittersweet moment. I had looked forward to celebrating with her, but she told me she had plans with someone named Scott and assured me there was no need for special preparations. While she may have intended to ease my burden, her nonchalant dismissal of the day stung. A day that meant so much to me seemed like just another day to her. Determined to see her, I took the day off work and made an extra effort with my appearance before heading to her office. But what I encountered left me shocked. In the lobby, I saw my ex-husband with his new partner, people I had hoped to avoid. I was confused as to how he knew to be there. When I called my daughter, she abruptly hung up, saying she was in a meeting. Feeling disoriented, I turned around and saw her greeting her father with a warm embrace. Her boyfriend seemed to know my ex-husband and his partner, further deepening my sense of betrayal. It felt as though everyone had conspired against me. Exhausted and upset, I quickly left. Reflecting on that day, I wrestled with the urge to confront my daughter and ex-husband, but a stronger instinct to protect my heart took over. Despite the pain, I resolved to continue loving and supporting my daughter, holding on to the hope that time would heal and bring understanding. I found myself unable to reach out to her. Then, unexpectedly, she came to visit, announcing her engagement and handing me a wedding invitation. As I read the invitation, my heart sank. The names printed on it left me stunned. Though she is my daughter, I felt a strong impulse to distance myself from her. How could she treat me like just another guest at her wedding? Unable to hold back, I confronted her, expressing my hurt about being sidelined on such an important occasion. "I'm not just a guest," I said. "I'm your mother." My daughter apologized, her voice hesitant, explaining that she was caught between wanting to marry Scott and the intense pressure from his parents. They scrutinized every aspect of her life. Her words left me wrestling with a mix of emotions, hurt by her actions but trying to understand her perspective. She shared her fears, telling me that being a divorced single mother and the struggles we faced might cause Scott's family to look down on her. That revelation cut deeply, and I couldn't hide my frustration. I reminded her of the sacrifices I made, working long hours in a restaurant to pay for her education and the hardships we had endured together. Her actions felt like a betrayal, yet I tried to bridge the gap between us, hoping to connect as she faced such a pivotal decision. But then she said something that struck me hard. She dismissed all the challenges we had gone through, focusing solely on her future comfort. She told me that her father and his new partner, the woman who had torn apart our family, had already met her in-laws. "The past doesn't matter," she said coldly. "It's the present that counts." Her callousness hit me like a slap. For the first time, I expressed my deep disappointment. She fired back with unexpected bitterness. "If you want to get rid of me, then pay me back for everything I cost you growing up." Her words stung, and the argument escalated quickly. She stormed out, leaving me alone with the wedding invitation she had left behind. Her father's name now filled the spot where mine should have been. 2 years passed, and I received heartbreaking news. My father, who had chosen to live on his own so as not to burden me, had passed away. His death left me with a heavy heart and a painful realization of my failings as a daughter. A few months later, I inherited the modest condo where he had lived. It became a bittersweet reminder of the family ties and challenges that shaped my life. As I stood in that condo, my thoughts turned to the money I had saved for my daughter's wedding. I realized how much of my life had been spent sacrificing for others, believing that my devotion would be enough. But maybe I had neglected myself along the way. It was time for a change. I decided to start living for me, even though it felt like it was late in life. As I reflected on everything I had been through, I made a vow to prioritize my own needs before it was too late. Then, a close friend, a real estate broker I had known from my restaurant days, gave me a new perspective. For so long, I had been focused on meeting others' expectations, ensuring they were cared for. But she challenged me to ask myself what I truly wanted, to break free from the endless sacrifices expected of women. Her words ignited something inside me, a desire to live for myself. Although I regretted the years lost to selflessness, I felt a renewed sense of hope. Encouraged, I decided to enter the real estate business. Using my savings and the proceeds from my father's condo, I learned about auction bidding and took a bold step. Incredibly, I became the owner of a prime property almost overnight. 8 months later, after an adventurous mountain climb, I moved into the top floor of the building and made it my home, a place where I could finally live on my own terms. One evening, as I relaxed after my adventures, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find my daughter standing there, visibly pregnant, with a toddler in tow, tears running down her face. Her life was in turmoil. Her husband had become violent and unfaithful, and now, with a baby on the way and a young child to care for, she had nowhere else to turn. Her arrival stirred old emotions. The pain of our past, the disregard for my sacrifices, and our bitter parting was still fresh. She confessed that she needed more than just shelter. She needed money, even mentioning the wedding funds and my inheritance. Torn between compassion and anger, I confronted her. I saved for your education and wedding. I sacrificed everything for you. You once told me to stay out of your life. Now, after all this, you come back and ask for money? A parent's love isn't something to be used when it's convenient. Her reply struck deep. I am still your daughter. You raised me to be strong. But maybe you were too busy working to teach me to be a better person. I've become selfish, and now I have no one else. My father's new wife took all his money, and now he's gone looking for her. If you abandon me, I'll be left like an orphan, with no one to turn to. How could you turn your back on me and your grandchildren? Her words overwhelmed me. In a moment of frustration, I threw the cash I had at her. Take it, I said coldly. But after this, don't come back. You can't just come and go as you please. Your life is important, but so is mine. I watched as she left, taking her child and the unborn burden with her. The pain of sending her away was almost unbearable. But her selfishness and the unresolved wounds from our past made it impossible to allow her back into my life. After that, my daughter never returned. Too proud to admit her wrongs, she severed all ties. I often wondered if things could have been different if she had come back, truly remorseful, asking for forgiveness. Perhaps I would have been able to help her deal with the mess her husband had created. But that moment never came. Instead, I was left to reflect on the complexities of our relationship and the painful lessons I had learned. Despite everything, I couldn't help but feel disappointed. My daughter had erased me from her life in pursuit of a marriage that brought her nothing but misery. It made me question why both she and my husband had made such destructive choices, even after all the sacrifices I had made for them. Now, I realize that the only person truly living the life I envisioned is me. This experience taught me a valuable lesson. No matter how strong your relationships may seem, you must prioritize your own well-being. Betrayal can come from anyone, but the one person who should never betray you is yourself. Happiness, I've learned, doesn't come from sacrificing for others, but from investing in your own life. My story may seem like a tale of a life half-lived, but I'm determined to fill the rest of it with experiences meant solely for me. Thank you for hearing my story. I hope it inspires you to prioritize your happiness and dreams. Let's support each other in living fully.